Welcome back to the Gator Country TV show. It's time now for this segment called the Gator Country Roundtable. We bring in friends from the media to talk about the issues of the day and what's going on. And today is special because we have two gentlemen from Alabama. I use the term loosely, gentlemen. Good to have you folks. Mike Davis, who does Birmingham Television, and Doug Segrist from the Birmingham News join us today for the roundtable. They attended Urban Meyer's press conference, and they agreed to come in and be subjected to humiliation right here on the Gator Country Roundtable. Good to have you guys, and let's start it off by talking about the obvious thing. Let's talk about Urban Meyer. Mike, start with you. How is Urban Meyer perceived outside of Florida and the state of Alabama?
Would Bin Laden be too harsh? I mean, the bottom line is he's a successful coach. I mean, successful in recruiting, successful on the field, wins and losses. And when you're successful, people aren't going to like you. It's the same way with Nick Saban. People at Auburn, people around the SEC don't like Nick Saban. Why? Because he wins, he's successful.
Yeah, kind of like Steve Spurrier and the evil genius tag he used to wear when he was winning around here, Doug. And your thoughts about his perception? You agree with Mike on that?
Yeah, I think right now the perception in Alabama, there are two coaches in a different class than everybody else, and that's Meyer and Saban. And you know, what you find out is the more he wins, the scarier he gets. You know, the same way with Spurrier. Spurrier became an icon, became folksy. People in Alabama started to love him when he moved to South Carolina.
There you go.
You know, guys, for all the talk about Alabama and Florida, two different programs, one is the SEC East, one's SEC West, it turns out these guys, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, for all their differences, they really are quite a lot alike as football coaches, isn't it?
Yeah, they're both recruit very hard. I mean, they're around the clock recruiting guys. They're the kind of guys who they've changed rules for on recruiting because they always try to get on that gray line and bend the rules a little bit. So they're similar in that way. Similar in also the way they control their program. I mean, there's only one guy, one voice. I will say that at least with Urban Meyer, he lets his assistants do interviews. Saban doesn't do that. He's the one voice, Bill Belichick, I'm in control type guy. I think Urban Meyer's the same type guy.
The lack of control or the lack of media access, you know, it really kind of jumps out. And is, from a coaching standpoint, it's a great thing. But what happens is when stories blow up that are out of your control, you know, an arrest, a coaching change, then they kind of get a life of their own and they lose that control. Meyer's an offensive guy, Saban's a defensive guy, but again, they're two of the best at that part, and they turn it over to people who know what they're doing. And that's the problem you see with a lot of coaches, generally who are defensive, offensive minded. They want to get their hand in it, in something they don't know anything about it, and that's usually when it gets messed up.
Let's talk about Alabama's football team. Two guys in particular that we're intrigued about. Greg McElroy had a big game last week against Auburn. Of course, he wasn't throwing against the Florida secondary, but what is now called the drive. Impressive performance by Greg McElroy. Everybody wants to know about Mark Ingram, and is he going to play? Is he hurt? Fill us in on the latest, guys.
Well, a hip horn is very painful, as you know, the big bruise on the hip, but it's just something you can take a pain shot for, something you can try to fight through. It's not something that will limit you in terms of playing, but he's just, what is his pain threshold mentally? What can he handle? Because it will be painful to try to run with football.
If he doesn't play, it makes the biggest difference in the third and fourth quarter because that's when he's the strongest. When the defense is wearing down, he really turns it on. But at the same time, Upchurch and Richardson, the other two running backs, are probably equally as good. Richardson may have a better long-term career.
And Upchurch, a better receiver out of the backfield. He gives that third down back dimension.
Well, that's not the only matchup. Obviously, there's two on defense, and the two names everybody knows. Rolando McClain, the inside linebacker, because they run a 3-4, so it's not a true middle.
Right.
And then Mount Cody, Terrence Cody, the biggest man in the SEC. You know, they list him at 350, but I'm not buying 350. Are you?
That's a little generous. He has lost a little bit of weight, so he is a little bit thinner and leaner this year. For him is maybe losing about 20 pounds. But the one thing I will say about Terrence Cody and some of those inside guys that Alabama has, when you get into a no-huddle offense like Utah did and what Florida did last year in the SEC Championship, those guys can get tired. You got to get them out, and it's hard to sub when a team's in a no-huddle. So that is the key with Terrence Cody.
Really, though, the key to that defense is McClain, not just because of his ability to go sideline to sideline, but he puts them in the right defense. He's the quarterback of that defense, and he can correct a safety out of spot, or he can correct a defensive end who's going in wrong, and he can make those corrections on the fly.
He's Doug Segrist. He's Mike Davis here from Alabama. We're talking Florida, Alabama coming up Saturday, the championship. Guys, I know you know all about Tim Tebow. Who doesn't? Give me two thoughts about it. Number one, where does he stand in terms of the Heisman right now? Is he out of it? Is he in it? If he's out of it, can he get back in it? What are your thoughts about him, and what do you think is going to happen in the Heisman race coming up? And by the way, I have a ballot, which I'm going to be voting on electronically It's all electronic for the first time this Saturday after the game. Your thoughts about Tebow?
Well, I think he's very much in it, especially if he has a good game against what is a very good Alabama defense. I thought Colt McCoy, had a great game, obviously, but how many people were watching? I mean, that's a big key. People are on holiday, and you don't know people who have a ballot how many were actually watching that game, although they did see the numbers. But yeah, I think Tim Tebow is definitely in it again, especially if he puts up the numbers against a very good Alabama defense.
I think Tim Tebow is the most valuable player in the country on the #1 team. But the Heisman, more or less, is kind of the guy with the flash and dash. To me, the best player in college football right now is Toby Gerhardt. He is doing more with less. I think Colt McCoy would be almost a career achievement award, and I think right now he goes in this last week as a front runner.
Look, Gerhardt's a tough runner, Doug, but
yeah.
I mean, some of the defenses, though, he's faced, come on, their tackling's horrible. And I'm not going to take anything away from the guy.
When you bounce
I love
off
Larry
that
Zonk, I love the way he
Notre Dame
runs,
guys,
but come on.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
But is this kind of, though, guys, a Heisman Trophy championship weekend as well? We talk about, the teams that Texas wins, they go, Florida or Alabama wins, they go to the national championship. But is this also a Heisman championship?
It's an
Well, I think it
elimination
is.
game. I've got about 10 seconds.
I think it is, but I don't think players get caught up in that. But I think long-term, a Heisman is more valuable to you as a player than a national championship ring in terms of endorsements and that kind of thing.
You agree with that, Doug?
Yeah, but it's going to have to come down to who wins the game.
I think you're right. Okay, final thoughts, guys. Give me a winner, give me a score of the SEC championship.
I'm going to go ahead and take Florida. I think with the experienced quarterback going in against even though McElroy proved himself a little bit in that final drive against Auburn, he hasn't faced a defense like Florida. So I'm going to have to go with Tim Tebow in Florida, 27-22.
I've liked Florida all along. I like Tim Tebow as a difference maker, but I think if Florida does not win, it's failure. They have been anointed #1 since the preseason, so I think Alabama upset 21-17.
Okay, well, it's going to be interesting. That's why they play the game. Our thanks to Mike Davis and Doug Segrist from Alabama for joining us on the roundtable. Franz and I will be back with our final thoughts after this timeout on the Gator Country TV show.
The Gator Country TV show is brought to you in part by the Huntington Learning Center. Call 1-800-CAN-LEARN today because your child deserves the best education.